Okay, so this section is about cell theory and about cells and how they're the basic unit of life. We'll talk a little bit about that a lot. First, we need to talk about how cell theory came about. It's all these scientists all did many different things. These guys were really big and the first ones to get microscopes. This guy, Leeuwenhoek, really improved the microscopes. Schleiden's the first one to find plant cells. Schwann came up with this idea that all living things are made out of cells. And then Virchow, I'm not really sure they say his name. He's a Russian dude, I think. He's the one that said that new cells come from old cells. That life just doesn't spontaneously pop up. There has to be some life there for it to happen. Early studies, the cell theory has three main principles. First one, that all organisms are made out of cells. Everything that is alive is made out of cells. Cells are the basic unit of life. It's supposed to be an I there. There it goes. Of life. Safe. All existing cells are produced by other living cells. So life comes from life. That's what that one is saying. All existing cells are produced by other living cells. And then finally, that the cell is the basic unit of life. And this is pretty much the three principles of cell theory. If you understand this, you've got cell theory. Cell theory is not that difficult or easy for you guys. Now, the way cells are organized, it helps them do their job and do what they need to do. The first thing is homeostasis. They need to maintain homeostasis. Remember, we've talked about this over and over again. That's maintaining the appropriate internal environment. And the thing that helps that the most is something called the plasma membrane. Sometimes you'll see it as the cell membrane. Those are the same things. Right? They're pretty much the same. It's the thing that acts as a barrier between the inside of the cell and the outside of the cell, and it protects the cell. Now, most cells also have internal structures or organelles. We learned about this in the first chapter. Organelles that carry out certain functions and certain jobs, and we'll talk about those a lot in the next section. They also have genetic instructions, which is encoded by DNA, which you guys know, and all that is usually in a certain spot. For eukaryotic cells, you know it's in the nucleus. In prokaryotic cells, you know it's in a certain region called the nucleoid. We learned that a little bit in the first chapter. Right, so, basic stuff, most of that. Now, cells are really, really small. They are very, very small, 1/1000th of a meter. And they need to be small. If they get too big, things don't work. And we'll work with that a little bit when we do some stuff in class. Now, everything that comes in and out of the cell has to go through the plasma membrane. And so if the cell gets too big, if we have a cell this big, right, there's so much plasma membrane for how much volume there is. If we get this big, now there's more plasma membrane, but there's way more volume. So even though the membrane goes up, the size of the membrane goes up, the volume goes up way more. Right, so the volume goes up way more. If you've taken lots of math classes or any geometry at all, you know that the area of something is always something. So area is always a squared function. It's always like x squared is area. Well, volume is the cube of it, so it gets bigger much, much faster. And that's why size is such an important thing. There's different ways of manipulating that, because some cells need to be really, really big. Nerve cells, for instance, need to be really, really long. There are ways of doing that, and so the shape can affect the ratio of that surface area to volume area, and that's why they need to be small. Also, there can be lots of little extra things, so microvilli or little things that come out that'll give it more surface area. It can also do things like it can make its surface go like this. Right now, there's a lot more surface area in a certain cell. We'll talk about those things. So some of the other things they can do, amoebas and white blood cells can change their shape as they move. Right, so they need to be able to move. Right, we want our white blood cells to be able to go to wherever we have an immune problem, where we have something making us sick. Sperm cells have long tails. They pretty much look something like this. Right, they need to be able to swim. So that's what their structure is. that makes them move that way. Nerve cells are really long, right? We need to have them be able to touch and feel different parts of our body, so they need to be really long. We need to know that when somebody steps on our foot, it hurts. And then epithelial cells or skin cells all kind of look like this, so they're able to make a nice protective layer, like almost like a brick wall around our body. So everything has this certain size and shape, which gives it its function. Which, how many times have we said this, right? Shape, I can't spell shape, determines function. We've said this over and over again. This should be very, very easy by now. Basically, there are two types of cells. We know this: eukaryotic and prokaryotic, right? We know that this is us, and this is like bacteria. The big thing is we have a nucleus. Plants are also eukaryotes. They have a nucleus. Prokaryotes do not. Right? So there you can see the nucleus in the eukaryote. In a prokaryote, like if this is a bacteria, you would just see the DNA all wound up in here, and it'd be kind of an area, and it's called a nucleoid, but it's not a nucleus. So eukaryotes have nuclei, which is plural for nucleus, and prokaryotes do. Here's the picture of, I thought I got put all these slides together, but I didn't. Here's a prokaryote. You can see there's no nucleus. So structure of a eukaryote, so let's start with those. That's what we are. First thing is a nucleus, which has all the DNA in it. Around the nucleus, outside of the nucleus, is called the cytoplasm. The part of the cell within the nucleus is called the nucleoplasm. That should make sense. The plasm is the stuff, right? Cyto means cell, so it's the stuff in the cell. Nucleoplasm is the stuff in the nucleus. Cytosol, a lot of times we'll use these two interchangeably, and that's fine. There is a difference, but for this class, we don't really need to know that difference. Cytoskeleton is just what it sounds like. It's a skeleton, and it's what gives the cell its structure and support. It acts just like a skeleton does. It does a little other things too, but really acts like a skeleton. And then there's some organelles that are only in specific cells, which we'll talk about those later. Cells that do photosynthesis. We don't do photosynthesis, so we don't have chloroplasts, but plants do. Prokaryotic cells, we said, don't have a nucleus. You can see, look, no nucleus. It's kind of hard to see something that's not there, but there's no nucleus there. They're very similar, though, in that they have cell membrane, just like we do, and they have a cytoplasm, just like we do. They don't have the organelles. That part is different. Now they're small, right? They're about 1/10 the size of one of our cells, or a eukaryotic cell. Like I said, the DNA is located in the nucleoid. Right? It's not enclosed by a membrane. There is no nucleus. It just isn't there. And there's no membrane-bound organelles. Remember before we said that eukaryotes have different types have different organelles to do different functions. A lot of these have cell walls. Now there are eukaryotes that have cell walls. Plant cells are eukaryotic, and they have cell walls. Many have flagella so that they can cruise around, right? And they all have ribosomes, which help them make proteins. Which we know what proteins are, because we've done that stuff. Now, eukaryotic cell membranes, it's the thing that goes around it, right? It goes around the cell. This is the membrane right here. But remember, it's also around the nucleus. So there's a membrane around the nucleus. And it does a lot of things. It's very, very important what it does. What they do is, first of all, it encloses areas and components. So we can have little membrane-bound organelles all throughout here. And what's important is that it kind of groups all the enzymes together. All the enzymes that do different reactions can be all together in one spot and make the reactions even run that much more efficiently. We don't want them all over the place. Well, some of them are all over the place, but we want them as close together as possible so that they can do their stuff that they need to. And you'll see some of the things are pretty complicated, and they need to be right next to each other. Also, another thing membranes do is they provide a separation. That's what this one's talking about, electrochemical gradient, which we'll talk about a lot more later. But it makes it different on both sides. It could be an electro one where there's lots of positive charges on this side, right? And lots of negatives on this side. and the membrane will help keep them separate like that. It could be a chemical one where there's lots of sodium ions on this side, and over here there's not a lot of sodium ions. So it could be a chemical separation. So membranes are good at separating different areas. There are different types of membranes in the whole membrane system. It's called the endomembrane system. It's all the membranes that are inside the cell. So things like the nucleus, which we've already talked about, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi complex, sometimes called Golgi apparatus, lysosomes, vacuoles, vesicles, all those things we'll learn about, but all those have membranes around them. And then these vesicles are pretty cool things. They're like shuttles or taxis that can move a bunch of materials from one place to another. And that's about all we're going to talk about for membranes right now. We're going to get into a lot more when we get to cell transport, but for right now, that's a good start. The next one we'll do is all about the organelles. All right.